All right, good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for joining tonight's meeting. We'll go ahead and start our meeting opening officially at 9:30, or excuse me, interpreter, 7:38 p.m. Now we'll go through the agenda as it was posted on the website, so you should have been able to see that. I would like to have somebody make a motion in order to accept the agenda as written.
I move to accept the agenda as written. This is Sue.
Thank you, Sue.
Second,
Thank you,
second by
Leslie.
Leslie.
Oh, Nancy, do you want to second as well? Okay, great. So all in favor, please raise your hands. All right, passing by unanimous consent. So with the approved agenda, I want to give you a little bit of an understanding for everybody on what the status of the regulations is. That's the purpose of tonight's meeting. We've been working on them diligently for quite a long time. This has not been an easy process, and there are some unfortunately uneasy comments for me to say at this point.
If I may, my apologies for interrupting, Chair. This is Leslie. Would you mind? We have two new people that we'd like to introduce before we proceed with the agenda.
Yes, I'm so sorry. There's a little bit of rote memorization to the beginnings of these meetings. So we do have three new board members that will be joining us during the meeting. We would like to have everybody introduce themselves, and so we'll go around the horn. My name is Jacob Leffler. I am the chair of this board. Leslie, if you'd like to go ahead.
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Dr. Leslie Puccio. This is how I'm referred to in sign language. I am currently serving as vice chair representing the community. Also a visual description, I'm a white woman wearing glasses. I have on red lipstick, a pair of earrings, a black shirt, and I have a dark blue background. It's wonderful to see everybody. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Sue, if you wouldn't mind.
Certainly. Hello, everybody. My name's Sue Beaver. I'm a representative of the community.
Thank you. Now, Jim,
Thanks for
if you'd
being
like
here.
to go ahead. Yes, my name is Jim Shevlin. I am representing PCRID. I'm not, in that role. I'm here as the board member. I am a SOTA, so sibling of deaf adults, and my wife is also deaf. Plus, I am a certified interpreter now since '94. So my license or certification did lapse, but I recently was able to get it renewed. So I am back, happy to be here, and currently I am in Tokyo, Japan for the Deaf Olympics. So good
Go
morning to all of
USA.
you. Yes, thank you, thank you. All right, this is Chair Leffler. Nancy, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi.
I'm Nancy Gaskins, new member to the board. Hello, everyone.
Interpreter, not certified, but been doing it for about so I'm just passionate. Community. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Now, before we proceed, I do want to not forget to mention that as the chair, as one of my roles on the board, I'm also the MDAD representative on the board. So I have those dual roles. Now, I would like to welcome Jim and Nancy Gaskins, Jim Shevlin, Nancy Gaskins. Now we will have another board member join us whose name is Juliana Apfel. She is a deaf certified interpreter who will be joining us, I believe, a little bit later this evening. So the reason we are meeting tonight is to discuss the status of the regulations as they stand. Now, this is not easy for me, what I have to say going forward, but I do think it bears some explanation. I'll get to the point shortly. Now, the governor's office, well, pardon me, let me back up. Director DeBerry, would you mind coming on screen, please? Director DeBerry, if you could come on screen, please. Ursula? Great. Now, this is the director of the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Director DeBerry. She'll be on screen with me to discuss this current topic, the status of the regulations. Now, firstly, the Governor's Office, the second floor, not at Ursula's level, but the actual second floor Governor's Administration, has informed me that they finally got the official statement last week in regards to the regulations being on pause. Now, the reason they have put a pause on the regulations is that they feel like they've gotten several concerns from various stakeholders, like MABE, the Maryland Health Association, and also some various educational organizations throughout the state. So the governor's office has met with them, and they would like to set up a work group to convene with the stakeholders and develop some revisions to the law. And the goal is to then revise the law, and it would be introduced in the next legislative session. Now, it's not easy for me to say this, but we've had several meetings with the governor's office over the last, I want to say, month. Ursula, is that correct, Director
That
Barry?
is
Okay.
correct.
Discussing this, what it's going to look like, what the plans are, what the goal and outcomes are that are desired, as well as the concerns. Because we are concerned with the pause and the regulations. I know that the board, we approved in September the regulations that we would like to have worked on. We've worked diligently to include
With Trudy Suggs,
with Shane
Shane,
Feldman, uh, with also
Richie Bryant.
Kaylee Tashira, and various previous past board members have all worked very hard over the time that we've been working on the regulations to get them where they are. So I was just informed of the pause, and that's why I am informing you that we are not going to be working on the regulations until the spring of 2026 due to that pause. We do have two people from the governor's office here that can provide some answers if the board has any questions to ask. And before I call on the two of them, I would like to allow the board some time to possibly vent before we move forward with any questioning of the governor's office representatives.
This is Ursula. I would like to state for the record that this meeting is being recorded. You gave us permission to record this meeting, and I just want to verify that. Thank you, Jacob.
Yes.
That being said, we can move on with comments from the governor's office. So I would like to say to the board that we want to recognize and acknowledge your hard work. That cannot go unnoticed. We have seen the effort and the investment you have put forth. We have seen the interpreting community working to support this law since it was passed. I also would be remiss if I did not recognize those who helped implement the portal, the current staff and the previous staff, and everyone who is invested in the drafting of the regs. Your work and the charge that you were tasked with was writing those regulations, and the board has worked very diligently to that effect, and we want to recognize that. And to all the interpreters who have come to these meetings, that is not easy. Okay. Working amongst peers. And you have been responsible for drafting those regs. So I want to say thank you and extend gratitude to everything that you have done up until this point. We continue to grow and learn And we want to bring this across the finish line, ultimately for the deaf, deafblind, and hard of hearing community in the state of Maryland. That is ultimately why we are all here. They deserve and they are owed this after so many years. They are owed effective communication access, and that cannot go ignored. So I just wanted to make that statement before you proceed and to extend our heartfelt gratitude for everything you have done.
Thank you, Director DeBerry. So again, the governor's office has asked us to pause and stop working on any of the regulations until we can get a working group together to look at revisions for the law itself. And then again, for the board, let's see, I believe we sent our regulations last year. And we had discussed alternative pathways that we would like to continue working on that. So we'd like to continue working on that part. So our work is not done. We will be able to work on the regulations after the pause is ended, but at this point we cannot. Are there any thoughts that the board would like to share at this time? Sue, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm really disappointed to learn of this. As a child of deaf adults, as someone with deaf parents, I know firsthand the struggles in finding interpreters, qualified and competent interpreters, skilled interpreters. And it's disappointing to me because, and let me collect my thoughts. I think about somebody who is a hairdresser. They're required to have a license to operate in the state of Maryland. And communication is so much more critical than a simple haircut. We need standards for interpreters here in the state of Maryland. Pausing the regs feels very much like it's sending a message to the deaf community in terms of how they are valued in the state or not valued. That's my opinion. It feels like the deaf community is being left behind, to be frank. And they deserve competent, licensed interpreters. They deserve access to all communication in every and all settings. This is upsetting.
Thank you, Sue. Are there any other comments that the board would like to make, thoughts they'd like to share? Vice Chair Puzio?
I echo Sue's sentiments. Yeah. This is a heartbreaking decision. And I'm not even close to the first group of people who actually began this work over 20 years ago. I was involved in the final two legislative sessions in drafting the bill that ultimately passed. And I was not on the board in the beginning. And I respect and recognize and thank the folks who did all of that work, hosting those community meetings, those town halls. And I have to ask, the three groups of stakeholders that the second floor felt had valid concerns or objections or whatever the case may be, I mean, both the House of Delegates and the Senate had the opportunity to hear concerns from individuals when the bill was passed. That's the whole point of having a law. A bill is written, it's presented, people have the opportunity to testify. This was 2 years in a row before it was ultimately passed and signed into law by the governor. And now all the work that was done to develop the regulations, and we feel that this group did its due diligence to hear from the community. We did not agree with everything that the community came to the table with. I know I personally did disagree with certain things. However, that's the point of the 30-day review period, is to collect feedback. And we did, as a board, make a lot of revisions to the regulations based on the feedback and what we heard. And for those groups of people to be so concerned that they raise objections, again, take us back to the beginning, those concerns about education or court or medical settings, whatever the case may be, we have already heard those concerns. Those concerns have been addressed, and we did make some modifications based on the feedback we heard. Okay. And actually, there were going to be amendments at next legislative session to address some of the concerns of the K-12 community specifically. So I guess my question for the two individuals, the guests joining us from the governor's office, is why was this decision made? Why was the board not involved? Why are we just now learning about this since September? I really feel that's egregious. It's absolutely atrocious. I'm not saying that the board should have been apprised of it before, but I would have been happy to hear from these community members because we have been fully transparent, and I am honestly shocked. What was behind, what is the rationale behind this decision from the second floor? Who had these discussions? Was it members of the deaf community? Was PCRID involved? Was the Maryland Association of the Deaf involved? Was the Maryland Deaf Advisory Council involved? I mean, I would prefer to have those two representatives from the governor's office speak a little bit to the impetus of this. Please and thank you.
As Chair Leffler, thank you, Vice Chair Puzio. Now, Jim or Nancy, would either of you like to make any comments at this time? Jim, I see your hand. Oh, Nancy. Jim first. So I just joined this board, you know, but I'm looking at this here. Are we ahead or behind when it comes to the, providing these comments? We've, looked at, I mean, looking around the country. I mean, we have a huge community here in Maryland of deaf individuals. And regarding to providing accessibility, we need to make sure that that is there. We need to make sure that we have skilled and qualified interpreters, period, full stop. And now we're walking it all back. There are so many states across the country that have laws requiring certification of interpreters to ensure that they're qualified. So they're ahead of us on this. We should not be trailing the lead. So, to the governor's office, with all due respect, who are the stakeholders? Will the community, the deaf community members, be a part of this? And for the board, we've taken the position that we have to discuss this and make sure that the deaf individuals are involved, the community is involved, not just simple organizations here and there that may be considered stakeholders, but those who have the experience of a deaf experience, who've lived up and been frustrated by the lack of access that they have seen throughout their lives. We need to take these organizations' considerations as part of, yes, that process, but we need to be more fulsome in our representative for access. Hmm?
Nancy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just saying, as Jim, what's the main reason why? It's just why is my question. So I'm not understanding why stop moving forward.
Thank you, Nancy. Now, before we invite our two representatives from the governor's office to come on screen, I would like to say that we have over 1.2 million deaf and hard of hearing individuals in our community living within just the state of Maryland. So this is going to impact the large community. I, as a deaf person, also will feel this. I've been involved in different deaf organizations, including MDAD. MDAD has been pushing for this bill before it became statute for it to be providing for licensed and qualified sign language interpreters. That's something we have been focused on. And I am worried about the harm that will be caused to the deaf community and the hard of hearing community writ large by this, by extending even further these regulations, by having a working group be involved. I think, we have been working quickly, and the hope is that they will be able to move as quickly with their revisions as possible so that we can get these regs back in place, hopefully, for next year. But the deaf and hard of hearing community should not suffer anymore. And to be frankly honest, we're fed up with it. We don't want to have them suffer because of inept, unqualified interpreters. So those are my thoughts. Vice Chair Puzio, did you want to add something?
Just one point to mention about statistics. I think it's important to mention that 1.2 million deaf and hard of hearing folks in the state of Maryland, technically the number is from the 2016 census, so it's quite antiquated.
Sure, yeah.
So we have to consider the fact that there's more than likely been an increase. And I'm not sure how much the two individuals joining us tonight have in terms of experience with the deaf community or ASL users or sign language interpreters. If they even, remember the testimony that took place at some of those hearings, or if they have been apprised of that. So there's a lot of history that goes along with this.
Thank you, Vice Chair Puzio. Jim, I see your hand is up. Yes, I just want to ask the question about the process. The law was passed by the legislature, right? It was voted upon. It was given to the governor's office. They signed it into statute. It was codified
Correct.
into law. And there were some extensions in regards to writing the regulations. Now, is the governor's office allowed to override the legislature in this effort by instituting this pause, or to change the law, to get a new amendment passed? What do we have any legal advice on what the power of the governor's office in this instance is? I mean, again, is it their ability to review and decide on specific instances? Sure. But I want to know what it is that we may understand to be their place. Now, the board by law, go ahead.
Can we object or appeal in the event that we disagree with the decision?
Yes, this is Chair Leffler. Director DeBerry, would you like to go ahead and respond?
I want to be respectful of everybody's time, particularly the governor's office staff. Would you like to call them up? If you would like me in lieu of that to respond, I honestly have many of the same questions. I was informed by our AAG that this is something that has historical context. It is something that has happened in the past pertaining to other laws. Understood that was under a different administration when Governor Hogan was in office. That was my understanding, is that he did put a pause on new regulations. That is not something that I have any previous experience with. So this is our quote unquote first time experiencing this type of action. We do plan to grow in this state and have a better understanding in terms of what the legal implications and expectations are. And I have no doubt that we will get through this. We are certainly not going to throw in the towel, and we are going to continue to fight towards that end.
This Chair Leffler. Thank you, Director DeBerry. I'd like to ask our two representatives from the governor's office to go ahead and come on screen, make any comments that they have in response. So if we could have Hannah Dier and Laura Gyamfi join us. Thank you. Hello to the both of you. So Hannah or Laura, who would like to go first? First, let's go ahead and introduce yourself to the board and the community, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. So I am Hannah Dyer, Deputy Legislative Officer for the Governor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Gyamfi, Senior Policy Advisor to the Governor. Nice to be here with you all today.
So Jacob, if it's all right, I'll go ahead first. So first of all,
Please.
okay. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to join you all tonight. I started in this role pretty recently, and so I'm very happy to be here with you tonight. Although obviously, I understand that this is a very difficult situation. So a couple things first that I want to make sure are clear. I want to echo what Director DeBerry said earlier. We are very appreciative of all of the work, and we know that there's been a lot of work over years that have gone in from the board into this process. Regulating a not a new industry, but newly regulating an industry is a very difficult thing to do. It is not easy. And I think that's part of what we're seeing right now. It takes a lot of time. So I just want to, again, and I've said this to Jacob in other meetings that we've had, we are very appreciative of the time that all of you have put into this process. And I don't want that to go.
Pardon me, this is the chair. If you wouldn't mind holding one moment, please, Ms. Dyer. So I do want to let people know in the audience that we are not accepting questions from the public at this time. This is an open meeting for you to observe the proceedings of the board. Please stop using the raise hand feature and interrupting the process. Thank you. Please go ahead, Steyer. Sorry for that.
Okay, so again, very appreciative of all of the time. We know that this is a process that, many individuals, those on the board, those that are just joining this meeting to listen, that a lot of people have been involved in, and it's taken a lot of time and effort to get to this point. This is not a decision that we have taken lightly. It's been the result of, significant concerns that have been brought to us by many stakeholders, not about, some about the substance of the regulations, some about the process to get to this point. And again, this is a newly regulated industry. And we want to make sure that we are being very deliberative and that we are setting everyone up for success. So I think one of the board members even mentioned earlier some potential changes to legislation in particular areas. And that really is at the core of where this decision comes from. We don't want to add to the confusion by having regulations move forward now, right before the legislative session, when we know that there are legislative changes coming. We felt that it was in everyone's best interest to put this pause on the regulations, to have certainty as to the legislative changes to the underlying statute, and then to pick up from where the regulations are, make the necessary changes and move forward. So I want to reiterate that no one is suggesting that we abandon the work that has been done. It's about making sure that there is certainty in the underlying changes that will be made during session, and then having clarity, reducing the confusion in terms of picking those regulations back up. And then the other piece that I want to make sure is clear is I want to reiterate the intent of the administration to fulfill the intent of this legislation. It is absolutely not our intent to abandon regulation of this industry. We understand the reasons for having the uniformity and licensing for the interpretation services. And that's not something that we're abandoning. This pause does not at all reflect that we are abandoning that. It is absolutely our intent that will be met, just on a somewhat delayed schedule. And I think with that, I will pause and see if Laura would like to add anything.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. I think she, really gave a good sense of where we are with the issue. I'll just echo again that we are all on board. The governor's office is on board with licensure. We do fully support that. There needs to be qualified, certified interpreters. And so we want to make sure that any of the work that you all as the board is putting into developing and sort of forming these regulations and regulating these interpreters, we want to make sure that time is spent fruitfully. And so based off of, as Hannah said, some outside concerns relating to substance and procedure, and looking at where we were based on the timeline, knowing that a new legislative fix or proposal was coming in January, would have only sort of made the work that you all have put in futile if we didn't figure out a way to pause and incorporate all of the changes that we saw coming. And so that is some of where that sentiment is coming from. And we've, had plenty of meetings. Like we said, we've talked with Ursula, talked with Jacob, with our legal counsel as well, with ODHH's AAG as well. And so have not made this as an isolated decision at all, and wanted you all to be confident in that.
This is Chair Leffler. I'm wondering if it was possible for maybe Hannah or Laura, if you wouldn't mind explaining to the board, because obviously we have our concerns, but the working group, what is the point? How is that going to be outlined? Would you mind explaining a little bit of what that will look like when it is commencing?
And a little bit more of what the concerns specifically were, please and thank you.
Sure. So in terms of the process for the working group, my intent is to send an email out tomorrow to stakeholders and other advocacy groups that we've identified to kind of kick off that process. We, of course, wanted this meeting to happen tonight first, for you all to be informed of what the next steps are before having that communication. Our timeline is relatively condensed, right? We're in the middle of November now. The legislative session starts in the beginning of January. So we would like the work group to come to consensus around legislative changes in order to move forward before session starts in January. And then the legislative session runs from January to the beginning of April. So we would know by the beginning of April what the outcome of that legislation is.
This is Chair Jim. Would you like to make a comment? All right. So you'd mentioned you'd be sending out tomorrow to the various stakeholders, correct? Would you mind describing for us who those individuals are? Who are the stakeholders?
Yeah, so this is something that we have talked to Jacob and Director DeBerry at length about. It includes the judiciary, the Maryland State Department of Education, the Maryland Hospital Association. I believe we have a nursing group. Laura, please chime in here. But we also have asked Jacob and Director DeBerry, I think, for representatives from your board, one or two representatives from your board who would be willing to participate, as well as one or two representatives from MDAD, as well as any other representatives that they feel are important to be represented in this work group. So those are names that we hope to get very soon.
This is Jim. Do you mind if I follow up, Jacob? Please go ahead. This is Jim again. I'm just asking that because, again, the governor's office seems to be not necessarily prioritizing the thoughts and opinions of deaf and hard of hearing. And we want to make sure that those are priority stakeholders, that community, again, that we want to make sure that they have mass representation within that working group. And this is Chair Leffler. Before we proceed, I would like to say we have our new board member, Juliana Apfeld, joining us this evening. She is here with us. Hello, Juliana.
Hello, everyone.
So just a quick update. Oh.
I was actually able to watch on my phone and I just transferred to the laptop, so no need for an update. I'm with you.
All right, all caught up. Wonderful. Yes, Vice Chair Fuzio, please.
So this is Leslie speaking. Question for Laura and Hannah, if I may. My biggest concern is that those stakeholders that were mentioned are honestly not stakeholders. Those are individuals who have filed complaints, and those are individuals that represent the hearing community. Okay. These are not folks that are concerned about the deaf community's barriers to access of quality and communication, because these are folks that historically have not provided quality interpreters. Okay. I think it is very important when you're talking about legislative changes, please understand that those legislative changes, we as the board voted and submitted one technical change. That was the only change that we voted on. Also, that technical change was missed during the actual drafting of the bill. Myself and Jacob were on the bill drafting committee, so I know it backwards and forwards, okay, by memory. And those requirements, national certification, such as RID or NAD, other certifications such as EIPA, or other criteria that would be subsequently developed by the board. Okay. It was the word and or that needed to be changed. So it was just one technical change that was voted and brought forward. So in all honesty, when you mention stakeholders, those groups of people, like Jim already said, the only group that represents deaf people that you mentioned is MDAD. And this is very concerning. And I'm curious if the governor's office, because you are here representing the governor's office, I'm curious if the two of you had the opportunity to read the 2 years worth of letters and testimony that was submitted by the deaf community, their testimony in front of the committees that spoke to some of the egregious things that took place, life and death stories that the deaf and hard of hearing community experienced as a result of fraudulent or unqualified interpreters. The Department of Education, their concern is about capacity due to a lack of qualified interpreters. They don't care about the education of deaf and hard of hearing children. The Hospital Association is concerned about their own interpreters not being certified. So I would like to hear from the two of you and know if you had the opportunity to read or watch or listen to the 2 years worth of committee testimony and what was said. And you also mentioned about the legislative change. What exactly was this task force? What are they planning to collect in terms of data? Because the board itself did not vote for any substantial legislative change, just a technical one.
Thank you, this is Chair Lefner. Appreciate those thoughts, Director Buzio. Now, again, my understanding is that the task force has not yet convened, or the working group has not yet convened. So they are trying to recruit individuals. So that's my understanding, that that's the position we're at right now, is recruiting those individuals, but they haven't actually started working in any capacity on the regulations or the statute. So again, the acceptance of the alternative pathway for licensure, accepting that, and some other regulation changes are things that we can work on. But specifically when it comes to the statute, the working group has not yet started on any of that, at least to my knowledge. Laura, I
Laura
see
has
your
her hand
hand.
raised.
Yeah, I had my hand raised a bit ago, so this is to a prior point, but I think the thing that we want to make most clear on our end from the governor's office is that we want to make sure that there is a happy marriage between what the community needs and what is functional in government. And so we want to make sure, or in industries, whether that's in schools or in hospitals or whatever that is. And so we felt best to bring all of the stakeholders together, which includes, SBSLI as a stakeholder, right, as representatives and leaders in the community, and then very open to suggestions, as we've mentioned, for other groups and voices to include, because we do not intend for this to be, something that is dominated by industry, but we do feel like it is important that the people that will be tasked with implementing this are having the conversations with you all front and center at the same, in the same space. And so that's where the impetus for this comes from. And so a lot of the level of detail to your questions are things that the work group, when it convenes, can sit and discuss and review, and that is going to be the space for that. But our main job is to make sure that procedurally that things are running smoothly and that everybody has confidence in the process as it's running, and also confidence that the end result is going to that the end product is going to result in the protections that you all are seeking.
As Chair Leffler, thank you, Sue. I saw you had your hand raised.
Thank you. I was just agreeing and echoing Leslie's sentiments. I think I share some of the same concerns in terms of what changes exactly are they referring to when it comes to the statute. My other concern is when you think about those stakeholder groups, they are predominantly hearing. And where is the deaf community's involvement? Where is their input and feedback? Where is their lived experience represented? Hearing people will never be able to understand the deaf experience. They can speak about it, they can talk about various elements, but they will never fully understand a deaf person's lived experience. Watching my parents struggle with a lack of qualified communication for things like their medical appointments, for mission critical, important medical appointments. Even basic things like the concept of informed consent for a medical appointment. If you have an interpreter who is inept, can you really say that informed consent is happening? It's impossible. Okay. This opens individuals up for litigation, for medical liability, for all kinds of things. And this law would serve to protect stakeholders in that way. Lawyers, doctors, the gamut. It's just, I can't. Everyone, every constituent of the state of Maryland should have equal access. No one should be left behind. Full stop. And I believe that has been the governor's messaging during his administration. And for our deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind community, right now with this action, I feel like they're being left behind. I recognize that it's being felt as it's being viewed through the lens of a delay and that it's not that mission critical, but for the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind community, it feels like an eternity. Going into any appointment without having full access to communication is a problem. I don't know if you all can imagine that. As a hearing person, I don't think you can. It's just mind-blowing.
Director DeBerry.
Like Chair Leffler mentioned, like everybody has mentioned, okay, we are all on the same team here. Jacob mentioned that this would be a difficult meeting and a difficult conversation. He also mentioned he wasn't sure how to respond because he knew how difficult it would be to share this message. Again, we saw the same thing, that the majority of these organizations were hearing-centric. Where is the deaf representation? We reached out to the governor's office to that effect, and they assured us that they welcomed more feedback. So we have referred a list of different organizations such as MDCC, the Maryland Advisory Council, so forth and so on. If there's others you can think of in terms of referring them, please make sure to share them with Jacob, and he will share them with Hannah and Laura. Okay, that is who's going to be taking the lead on this work group. It falls under the governor's office, so they will be spearheading this. We know that there are organizations not represented, and we want to see them added. So please do. We need to keep pushing to make sure this comes to fruition for the deaf community. Okay, this is really a platform for deaf people. We recognize that are allies out there that can help, but the majority of, understandably out there, the folks who are making these decisions don't have that shared understanding. So we have a responsibility to our community. Okay, and I did see a hand, Juliana. I just wanted to, go ahead.
Go ahead. This is
Okay.
Juliana. I am a deaf individual. I grew up in Arizona. I am also licensed as an interpreter. Well, I grew up in this system. So I know it's not easy to set up licensure. I know a lot of people are resistant to that, and I can understand those resistance. but we are committed because the reasons that have been mentioned. And there are various factors that are impacting when it comes to language use within these areas and these communities. Again, when it comes to the regulations and different aspects of communication, that we want to make sure that there's individuals that have access to communication across the breadth of language use, whether it's in layman's terms or technical communications. ASL is a language in its own right. Do those individuals have that access? So those organizations, do they have the power to really speak to what they're seeing? There's so many barriers that the deaf individuals are experiencing. And we need to figure out how we can really get different individuals from a variety of backgrounds, these grassroots efforts and organizations into the places where they can start to make these decisions, where they have access and they can start making those decisions at the speed at which they need to be done. So I think we need to make sure that we have the representation across the entire deaf community, including our grassroots members. Ms. J. Director, Vice Chair Puzio, please.
This is Leslie speaking. Just one organization that I think is so important, particularly when it comes to education being such a large group with so many concerns, is MSD, the Maryland School for the Deaf, and their two campuses. And I'll be completely honest, I would like their opinion and their view with their background and contextual knowledge to be shared. Okay. Also, MSDE as the, how do I say? I think they have a lot of mainstream students, but as Juliana just mentioned about language accessibility, I don't know how much we know about statistics within this group, but over 90% of deaf children have hearing parents, the majority of whom don't become fluent signers. So the place where that cultural and language knowledge is passed on is at schools for the deaf. So it's not just about language access, it's also about a wealth of things. And not responsibility, but it is the burden of the governor's office. Whoa, I just had a moment to please hold. Okay. The burden of the governor's office is to take on this mantle and to know what folks need to be prioritized as members of this task force. Because the loudest voices, okay, oftentimes are overriding the most qualified voices, and that needs to stop.
This is Chair Leffler. I know we are already at 8:30. I want to respect everybody's time with the proceedings of this meeting. I do want to say I appreciate Hannah and Laura. If you wouldn't mind explaining, just making sure that the balance within the group of deaf individuals, deaf and hard of hearing individuals, and making sure that we also include interpreters into that mix to the people that are professionals within the field and know that. I want to make sure that we want to make sure that, again, the timeline is so tight, we want to make sure that those balances are appropriately made. So I appreciate that you'll be sending out for stakeholders, but do you know what the expected timeline is? How frequently will this group be meeting? 2 or 3 times a week? What is the timeline? How is this going to happen in the most expeditious manner as possible? I mean, with the January legislative session, I know that means they're going to have to work quickly, to draft a bill in time to get it put in with the amendment revisions required. And I want to see something that is very robust. I don't want anything that is milquetoast or could be easily disregarded. So we want to make sure that it's still strong, but at the same time, whatever revisions they have, we want to make sure that the work group is qualified in making them and has those balanced and appropriate priorities. So Hannah or Laura, would you like to expand a little bit more on what the timeline is, the actual setting and frequency of meetings for this group?
So Jacob, I think you're absolutely right. The working group will have to meet. There's a very short period of time to do this work. I don't expect that we'll be able to meet twice a week, but I think we will have to do our best to juggle kind of the responsibilities that everyone has this time of year in particular, with coming to consensus around a legislative proposal to move forward. So I can't commit to any specific timeline, particularly as we have talked about with Director DeBerry and Jacob, prior to this meeting, we're still trying to get identification of some members, particularly representing the deaf community and sign language interpreters. I am eager to hear recommendations from you all in particular. Please send me an email or reach out to me. I'm eager to hear recommendations. We want those voices included in this work group. But, pending that outreach that I do again tomorrow to stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I'm including the deaf community and the sign language interpreters. I am not only saying stakeholders to include, the judiciary, the hospital association, MSE, those others that have reached out with concerns. I mean, everyone who is a stakeholder in this process. So I will do that tomorrow. And I think after that, we will have more clarity on the exact timeline for the work group meeting. But I think, Jacob, you're absolutely right. We have a short period of time to do this work. And so Laura and I look forward to getting that kicked off as quickly as possible.
Jim, go ahead. Hannah and Laura, I know it's not easy. I want to recognize that is a position that you're in, an uneasy one. But I would ask that you consider committing to making at least 51% of this working group deaf or hard of hearing. These, again, are going to be impacted by everyone, like the board has said. And they're going to be the only ones that are truly impacted the most. This is the community. They should have 51%. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, and our apologies if we haven't made that clear. From conversations we have had in the governor's office that we've had with Jacob and Ursula, we've been very clear that we fully intend to have deaf participation in the work group. And so this idea about 51% participation, we've also discussed that as well. And so again, the reason why we came to you all to update you is that we haven't finalized the group. We haven't finalized membership. We haven't moved forward without you all, right? And as Hannah said, when we use the term stakeholders, we very literally mean anybody that has a stake in this matter. And so that very much so includes the board, includes the deaf community interpreters, and all of the above. So this meeting is intended to inform you all. And then let's get, these names. We had reached out to Jacob and Ursula for those. I think Ursula just sent them over today so we can look through those and finally be able to see, which members of the community we can, would be eager to join the group and how that's going to look. Of course, we can't take this won't be a 100-person work group, right? This is going to have to be small. It's going to have to be, focused. And so we're going to make sure that we meet in the middle, right? But we absolutely hear you and feel that it's important that this is led by people that will be most impacted. And so we don't at all want to suggest that the deaf community and interpreters and those that would need these services will be left out of the process. We want that to be very clear that we are all on the same page there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Vice Chair Puccio?
This is Leslie speaking. Thank you for the clarification. The stakeholders you mentioned and the reason we bring this up, okay, the only members of the deaf community you mentioned in terms of the ability is MDAD. All the others were not. So that's why we are respectfully asking to make sure that the deaf community is included and recognized. We're not saying that you weren't willing, but those that we have been identified don't represent those so important marginalized groups. So that is why we're asking. In addition, we are also asking for full transparency, not just for members of the board, but for the community as a whole, in terms of the names, not just the names of the organization, but the actual names of the members who participate in this work group. We ask that those names be published because sometimes bearing witness to the deaf and hard of community in the state of Maryland, being told that certain organizations are involved and being told that certain people are involved. However, the intentions behind that are sometimes not as explicit. So we would like the names and the organizations published. One more question, maybe not for the two of you, but in regards to licensure, for those individuals who have already applied. I'm sure that that's a big question many folks who are watching right now have. So Tanea, Ashla, will there be a mechanism in place to have their money refunded? Because I'm sure that's a huge concern for folks. I'd actually like to respond. Okay, in terms of mentioning MSD, we don't want to be duplicative in terms of effort. We already have an MSD representative on the Maryland Advisory Council for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Board. So this is a working group that cross-pollinates. So I'm not sure how we're going to address that. And as was mentioned, they're preferring a group that the complement is manageable. So we'll have to figure that out. FAQs that will be coming out soon will address people getting a refund. We can work individually with those folks who express an interest in having a refund. The FAQ mentions contact the Governor's Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and we can address anybody who has already applied and would like a refund.
So this is Chair Leffler. Now, Director DeBerry mentioned the FAQs. We have made videos to those as well. We are looking at having the FAQs posted on the ODHH website tomorrow, correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Great. So those are ready to go because we want the community to know and have the most updated information. We don't want the community to be the last ones to get the news. So again, I want to say thank you for GODHH for working on this. And now,
We have a
following the
question
open
for
meetings,
Hannah.
following the Opens Meetings Act, with our boards, we've had to have this public meetings. So the question would be, would we want one or two people from the board to be within the working group, or because of the Open Meeting Act and the requirements that are placed upon us as members of the board, would we want to need, or by necessity need to limit our participation?
If we could have an interpreter come up, please, so that Hannah or Laura can answer that. So prior to the meeting, Hannah did reach out to me and asked who would be a representative from the board on this working group. And I explained that, Jacob, you would have to communicate with the board first, and then we would go for there. So in terms of number of folks, be it one, be it two, we're not sure yet. Hannah, do you want to speak to that? And if board representation on the working group would somehow be influenced or influence the Open Meetings Act?
Sure. So I guess first I can speak to, and this may be kind of the bigger issue. As Laura mentioned earlier, we want to make sure of a couple of things. We want to make sure we're having diverse representation of perspectives on this working group. And then we also want to make sure it's a manageable size. So we're trying to manage those two goals here. And I think for that reason, we would ask that the board sends one or two representatives rather than all 7 members of the board. We'd like one or two representatives that can represent the perspective of the board. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, so looking for one or two members, right? And we can discuss that this evening on who might be interested in joining that working group. Nancy, I see you keep popping on and also disappearing from the screen. Do you mind maintaining your video on? Perfect. Now, are there any more questions for Hannah or Laura before, again, we start discussing who may, amongst us, want to be part of the working group? Do we have any other further questions for Hannah or Laura this evening? Okay, seeing none. I want to thank both Hannah and Laura for your time tonight, joining us and answering the board's questions, and really appreciate your explanations and clarifications that we've seen this evening. So thank you, and I hope you both have a great evening.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Laura, perfect. Thank you. Now, Director DeBerry, if you wouldn't mind. Now we have just the board on screen. are there any more thoughts or comments that people would like to make, or would we like to address the topic of the working group with just the six of us here? Again, thinking about time. I know, Jim, you're, traveling until December. You're out on the world, right? That was right? Okay, so we can't really count you in, unfortunately. Leslie, Vice Chair Puzio, Sue, Nancy, Juliana, would either of you be interested in joining that working group?
This is Juliana speaking. I wouldn't mind. I'd certainly be interested. I think it would be nice to have some representation, both deaf and hearing, to share both perspectives. That way we can also reach out to both sets of communities. Maybe myself or Jim or whoever, somebody to be can both represent, just to be able to really engage with the folks out there. Some people have some resistance to the idea of a board or any group, any general organization, anything like that. Some folks automatically have a level of resistance to that type of structure. So the ability to reach out to those folks who do have that level of resistance and work collaboratively with them to garner support from those folks out there. Those are my two thoughts. I'm certainly interested, but I would need a little bit more information first, to be completely honest, to make sure it's a good fit and make that determination.
Understood. So the working group is going to be looking at revising and amending the law itself. So we'd have representation from the hospitals, from educational groups, and other individuals. Now, maybe there's not enough time tonight, given the time, but we can correspond via email for maybe follow-ups on who might be interested. Yes, Vice Chair Puzio.
I would agree with Juliana. I think
Mhm.
the new deaf representative on the board there, I think it is important, regardless, whoever it is, be it Nancy, be it Jim, be it Juliana, if it's two, if it's three, if it's one deaf and one hearing, regardless. I think it's important. Three of us have already have some historical context, but there are some big items that are going to be discussed. The development of the regs, there are many things that have happened during the development of the bill, the first bill, the initial bill. And that's why some of the decisions that were made based on some of the communications and exchanges we've had with the community. To give you an example, there are only two post-secondary programs in the state of Maryland that train interpreters. Of course, we know Gallaudet is adjacent, but really there are only two. So making sure that those interns can get placements, those are some of the things that we've talked about. And I don't even know if the governor's office has considered or is privy to all of those details and all of that minutia. So I think to be able to have somebody who has some of the historical context in addition to maybe one of the new members.
And this is Chair Leffler. I want to be careful that we want to be careful on what conversation we're walking into, making sure that we have the ability to, meet with different individuals, talk to, really go between the communities. We have to be careful with that, though, as well.
Let me re-explain it. Yeah, because I don't think the interpreter had that correct.
Mhm.
Who explained? Me?
Oh, Jake.
Go ahead and say, no. The topic of walking conversation.
Pardon the interpreter. So Leslie, yes, you'd mentioned how we want to have these various conversations with different individuals. And we want to be careful with those walking conversations, because I, might be chatting with Jim, and then I'd walk over and meet with maybe Juliana and have another discussion, and then meet with, maybe Nancy, right? And again, we want to be careful that we're not necessarily breaking our word or anything like that with any individual. So we want to be very careful with that. So we will be having a retreat later with which we will be able to discuss that or discuss the board's views.
And the Open
And
Meetings
again,
Act. And the Open Meetings Act.
right. So we want to be careful with those walking conversations, not violating the Open Meetings Act, et cetera. So again, members of the board who would want to be in the working group, I would like to know interest, and then also who else besides Juliana might be interested. Nancy, I
I'm
saw you
willing.
raised your hand before.
I just said I would
One
just
sec, Nancy.
need more information. I'm interested. but I need, just some more, information. So I may, have to you just observe, first, and then, actively, participate. Understand that?
Or maybe we'd like to call Hannah back to understand a little bit about, or Laura, to understand a little bit more about the scope of the working group. Do you think that would be helpful?
Are they still here?
Hannah or Laura I think Hannah are either of you here still? So Hannah, could you please give us a little bit of a description of what the scope of the working group will be? My understanding is revisions to the law specifically, but what else will they be looking at? Can you provide a more fulsome description of that scope?
So I think I have shared kind of already the scope that we have at this point. There have been significant concerns about the process and the substance of the regulations to this point. And so that's why we're putting this pause to look at the underlying statute. And I don't think that any of this is new information to you all because you've been through a comment period already on draft regulations. But I think one, for example, of the primary areas of concern.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead, Jacob. It looked like you were.
Yes. No, I don't necessarily meant just what we were talking, but essentially, what are we focused on? Or essentially, the scope is just to focus on revisions to the law, correct?
Yes. This work group will not look at the regulations at all. It is only about the statute.
So does that clarify for the board members? So Juliana, do you feel that that's clear?
This is Juliana. Yes, that's clear. So I still need to have a better understanding in terms of time commitment. Is the goal to listen and to advocate, or is the goal to really be involved and participate in active discussion and editing the regs, even though what the board previously put forth was agreed upon? So are we jumping in to protect the decisions that we've already created? Or, I mean, this is the reason I'm asking the question, because are we serving to protect and justify the board's decisions in the first place? In that case, it's better to send somebody who has some institutional knowledge, versus board members who just came on board. Or is this really just an open discussion regardless of what came before? That's going to help me and really help us as a group decide who would be best in terms of representation.
Hannah, would you like to respond to that?
I can respond. I don't know that question was directed towards me. But again, just to reiterate, this work group is not making changes to the regulations. They are only looking at the underlying statute. From my perspective, I would like someone who can represent the interests, the opinions, the experience, everything of the board. But I also would like someone who is open to having collaborative discussions with the rest of the stakeholders. And again, I want to reiterate that when I say stakeholders, I mean everyone involved in this process, not just a narrow group. So from my perspective, it would not be the most productive to send someone who's coming in only to protect what has already been done, because that's kind of the purpose of putting this pause and looking at the underlying statute.
So to work collaboratively, absolutely understood.
So basically, they're saying that the working group is going to be a working group that is drafting a proposal to amend the current statute, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. So Nancy, do you have any other questions that you'd like to ask?
No, I'm fine for now.
Great, thank you. Hannah and Laura, again, thank you both. So we have a better, more clear understanding of the working group. So are you interested, Juliana?
Definitely, I'm still interested. Yes.
And then who else would also be interested in joining the working group?
This is Leslie. Again, I'm interested, but it seems just looking at some of the comments and the facial expressions, I don't know if necessarily I was part of the bill writing group and I was part of the bill and the drafting of the bill that ultimately became the law. So I'm not sure if my name would be one of the better names to put forward.
So I'm confused. You do want or you don't want to be involved? Which is it?
I would like to be involved, but from the facial expressions and Hannah's comments and tones, I don't feel like my input would be welcomed. I could be wrong, but and I also, I can hear tone as well, so I don't necessarily have to rely on the interpretation.
Understood. Juliana?
Again, I think having both deaf and hearing representation is important. I also think having representation in terms of a new person and institutional knowledge would also be important, for those new appointees and those folks who have been there. And also when you go to that working group to foster that sense of collaboration. So I think Jim or Nancy, if they want to go, I'm happy to give up my place, but I think it is important to have both representation in terms of deaf and hearing and also representation in terms of experienced institutional knowledge and new perspective. I don't know some of the history of what's taken place, but regardless of what Hannah thinks, I think we are the board and we should ultimately determine who we send. That, frankly, is how I feel about it.
I
We
concur.
are the subject matter experts in the field. Both myself and Leslie are working interpreters. So that's my 2 cents as I see it.
Jim, go ahead. So for me, I'm going to be back December 1st, so that would be the earliest I could be involved. I don't think I would be the best person to be involved in the working group given my schedule constraints. I think, we have to practice what we preach, right? So we need to make sure that that is there. So Giuliani, you're a certified deaf interpreter. You have experience in that realm. We need that experience and that perspective within the working group. And we need the experience and the perspective from the community that you bring. Leslie or Sue, you are also practicing and certified interpreters. I think your views and your knowledge is important. So, Jacob, I don't know if you're interested or not, but I think if, like has been suggested, we have one hearing individual and one deaf individual, both representing the board, then I think so. Now, if we need to vote tonight to solidify our nominations, that's something I would like to know.
This is Leslie. Again, I am willing, but I also want to hear to see if Sue's interested as well, because I don't want to just assume and take the position. So
Sue,
I would be interested. Certainly, my biggest concern is, again, being on the Eastern Shore. I recognize that communities are a little bit larger in like the Baltimore area, and Juliana being able to reach out to the deaf community directly. There's not a huge deaf community here on the Eastern Shore. I could certainly reach out to folks, no question, but in terms of numbers, I mean, that would just be my only concern. Also, at the same time, I am on the Eastern Shore, and that is an underrepresented community, to be sure, in that space. So I'm certainly willing, but.
this is Chair Leffler. I would like to really comment. All of us will be contributing to the working group. I think in some form or fashion, we can all agree to that. We have our various skills that we could contribute were we the members to represent the board there when it comes to statements, and then also based on, geo, I missed that.
Geographics and stakeholders
But
and who is concerned.
we also have obviously, the legislature or the judiciary and all of those individuals. So working interpreters, I think it might be an opportunity for maybe Sue to provide some insights. I think Leslie, you would be a great person as well. Juliana, I think it's wonderful if you're a part.
What about
But,
Nancy too? Nancy also expressed some interest. Yeah,
oh,
Nancy's
Nancy,
interested as well.
do, are you interested?
Yes, but I don't want to be like the lead person. I want to more just observe. I know policy, I know policy, and I'd like to apply it here. But, I just need, just need to, work, I guess, slowly, I hope I'm making sense. But I'm interested, yes.
Understood. Thank you. So we need to pick 2 members of the current board who would be interested in being in the working group. I'm not interested. That would be one more thing on my plate, and that's quite a bit right now. So Juliana, I think as our deaf representative, that kind of leaves you as the only person available. Leslie, go ahead.
This is Leslie speaking. I'm curious whether it's Sue or myself. We could have those conversations about collecting the information, particularly as it pertains to educational interpreters. Juliana, of course, can reach out to the deaf community. I do a lot of legal work, and of course, the courts. Yes, yes, yes. But the court system certainly has one of these stakeholder groups that has all these concerns. So I think whoever, go ahead. Okay, who's Mary Pat Bromwell? They're trying to control my camera. What is happening? Please hold.
What is
I
going
don't
on?
know. Something popped up saying that somebody was trying to take control of my camera.
Who's saying?
Anyway, sorry, I don't know. Okay. Moving on. I'm sure because one-on-one, it would be a violation of the Open Meetings Act if we had these walking conversations. Okay. So being able to collect information, the work group, the task force with education, Sue having taken the lead on that before. Again, my semester is over in 2 weeks. So I have the entire month of December and January available and free. But again, I am completely flexible. I'll defer to the board.
So Juliana will be one representative. Leslie or Sue, which one of you would like the honor?
I have a comment. This is Sue. All right. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Leslie does have more content knowledge in terms of being part of who drafted the bill and a lot of that historical institutional knowledge about the process. I don't have that. And it seems to me, it sounds like this working group is going to be focused on editing the statute. And if Leslie knows some of the impetus for why some of those decisions were made, historically speaking, she could better serve to justify some of the decisions that were made in terms of what took place in the past when the bill was first drafted. I don't have that background knowledge. So
Understood, Mr. Lebler. So Juliana, Vice Chair Puzio, it looks like the 2 of you are the selection of the board. I will go ahead and let Hannah and Laura know tomorrow morning by email. And I want to say thank you for the work that you will be putting in. And please keep us abreast of what's going on.
thank you. Thank you both.
Yes, it's a large responsibility, and January 14th is fast approaching. Getting those revisions written and in place for that proposal. We all of us want to support the community, and support that legislative process to get it done and over that hurdle. So I moved that as we're coming up to adjourning our meeting, I want to let everybody know that we will be having a retreat soon. We will be following up by an email to figure out what time and schedule works best. This will be an open board meeting in December, or rather, we will have an open board meeting in December as well. And again, we'll work with Ushla to work out the logistics there. Again, sending things out via email. So I want to say thank you. Yes, Vice Chair Puzio.
Question for Ethan. Ethan, would you mind joining us, please? And thank you.
Is it related to legal advice?
If if it's an if would be.
Okay. So we would need to go into closed session
Right,
to
I
get legal
recognize
advice.
that. That's why I want to ask. So I'm not sure if this discussion in question is related to legal advice. I have a question about appointing. If we wanted to have conversations about the appointing of members, I'm kind of curious. I've got some questions about appointments of positions amongst the board. I'm not sure if that's a conversation that would move us into closed session, or if we could ask some of those questions of ODHH now during open session.
So currently,
the agenda just spoke to talking about the status of the regulations, not having a conversation about the complement of the board. This is Ethan. If any board member has a question, they can certainly reach out to me directly for counsel. I guess my question is, I don't know if it's a legal matter or not. I have a question about the appointment of positions on the board and the rules therein.
And reach out to me.
And rules that are not being followed when it comes to appointments.
Yes, please reach out to me for that.
Okay. Okay.
Director DeVere.
Okay, this is Ashula. Okay, that is actually under our auspice, and that is a discussion that we can follow up off on email since it is not part of tonight's agenda. Okay, so we can certainly follow up via email. So I have a follow-up question. Can the answer be provided, the answer that is provided, can that be shared out with the community at large? Answer about what? Appointments? About the question that I have about board appointments. We can certainly talk about that via email. Nothing about appointments is confidential. Okay, I recognize that we can have a conversation via email, but can the results of that conversation be shared with the community? If the decision that's made is ready to be shared with the community, yes. If it is something that is still in process, it might still be privileged and not be available to share. Depends. Okay, I'll email Ethan and follow up. Thank you. Okay, make sure you CC me, please. I will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
As Chair Leffler. So I want to thank everybody for your time tonight, for tonight's meeting. It is regrettable that I had to break this news to the board and to the community as well. I am looking forward to seeing the working group and the results that come from it. So Jim, Juliana, Nancy, I want to say welcome as our new board members. Congratulations for your appointments to this board. You will be hearing from me soon in regards to the retreat and figuring out the next board meeting. So I want to say thank you to everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Motion to adjourn?
Oh, yes.